Hello, everybody. Students, welcome back. So, we are on record number two. We were discussing, first of all, we were discussing George Bernard Shaw's spoken English and broken English. And today we are going to start with record number two. So, as I told you, that George Bernard Shaw himself is speaking here. And so, let us read what he is saying. I'm now going to suppose that you are a foreign student of the English language. Now, here you are the listeners of this record. So, here he says that he is going to suppose that his listeners are either foreign students who want to learn English language and that the listeners desire to speak it well enough to be understood when the listeners travel in British Commonwealth or in America, or when the listeners meet a native of those countries. So here again he says that he is supposing that either the listeners are foreign students of English language or they desire to speak it in a good way so that when they travel to British Commonwealth or a British area or America, so that the natives of those countries can understand the speech of English speech of these foreign students. Or it may be that you are yourself a native. Or another case which he is going to suppose is that the listeners are the natives of English, of the areas where English is the main language, means Britain or America. So he says that he is going to suppose that the listeners are the natives of such areas where where, but that you speak in a provincial or Cockney dialect of which you are a little ashamed or perhaps prevents you from obtaining some employment which is open to those only who speak what is called correct English. So students, here he says that first of all, let me tell you that language plays a very important role while getting any job. Just like we say, interview is the most important thing when we pass some examination. So, what is checked in the interview? No doubt, knowledge of a person is investigated. Apart from knowledge, language plays a very good part, very important part. So, if a person's language, if a job seeker's language is pure, okay, it hasn't the language doesn't reflect any particular dialect, okay, then that language is a pure language. So the words here provincial and Cockney are kind of dialects, just like in Punjab we have dialects Majha and Malwa. If some in Punjab, if someone is speaking pure Punjabi, then that person is given, that person is uh, taken to be more uh, good for a certain job, eligible for a certain job. So here George Bernard Shaw also talks about this issue that either you are a foreign student who wants to come to the British area or America. Other cases that you are a native and you speak Cockney dialect or any other dialect and you are ashamed of yourself that you are not able to speak English language properly, correctly, and you will not get some employment due to your language. Okay, now I'm reading. Now, whether you are a foreigner or a native, the first thing I must impress on you is that there is no such thing as ideally correct English. No two British subjects speak exactly alike. Now he tells the listeners that there is no such thing like ideally correct English. Okay, he says there is no such thing. There is no such idea that there is a correct English. And why there is no correct English? The explanation is given in the following lines. Why? Because no two British people, okay, no two British persons speak exactly alike, or they don't speak sim in a similar way. Okay, now he will explain this through through an example. Let us read it. I am a member of committee established by the British Broadcasting Corporation for the purpose of deciding whether the utterances of speakers employed by corporation should be pronounced in order that they should be a model of correct English speech for the British Islands. So here he says that George Bernard Shaw himself is a member of a committee. The committee has been set up by Broadcasting Corporation. So now, what is the purpose of the for establishing this committee? The purpose is to decide which pronunciation is right and which is wrong, so that so that the committee can produce or can become a model for of speaking correct English. Okay, model of speaking correct English in British area or in Europe. Okay. So there is some another explanation of this committee. Some more has been written. All the members of that committee are educated persons whose speech would pass as correct and refined in any society or any employment in London. So all the members of this committee, George Bernard Shaw is also the member of this committee. So every member of this committee is educated and speaks correct English and speaks so refined English that that person is the most eligible person for employment in London. Our chairman is poet laureate, who is not only an artist whose materials are the sounds of spoken English, but a specialist in their pronunciation. So, who is the chairman of this committee? It is the poet laureate. And poet laureate is the one whose poetry is the best. And so that is why he says that this poet laureate's artistic work is is a source of new English words and yes, new English words for the English continent. And this poet laureate is also specialized in his pronunciation, that he is really a very good speaker and his pronunciation is always correct. Okay, another member is one of our members is Sir uh, Johnson Forbes Robertson. And this person is a famous actor and he is known for his beauty of his speech. Actor and beauty of his speech. Now he is going to talk about himself. I was selected for service on the committee because, as a writer of plays, I am accustomed to superintend their rehearsals and to listen critically to the way in which they are spoken by actors who are by profession trained speakers. Being myself a public speaker for long experience. So here he says that how he himself, George Bernard Shaw himself, became the member of this committee. Because why? Because he is a writer, he is a playwright, and since he is a playwright, he is a member of theater as well. So whenever actors are doing rehearsals of his plays, so George Bernard Shaw is present over there and he corrects the pronunciations of those actors. Those actors are themselves trained personalities. They are trained, those actors are trained speakers. So it means George Bernard Shaw uh, corrects those actors who are already trained. And he himself is a public speaker and he has a long experience of that as well. So for three reasons, first reason is he writes plays. Second reason is that he is himself a public speaker. Third reason is he corrects those actors who are already those who have already good pronunciation skills. Okay. That committee knows as much as anyone knows about English speech. And yet, its members do not agree as to the pronunciation of some of the simplest and commonest words in the English language. So now he says that everything is fine with the committee, that those who are member of that committee speak very well. But sometimes all the members do not agree with the pronunciation of common and simple words like yes or no. Okay. Let us read. The two simplest and commonest words in any language are yes and no. But no two members of the committee pronounce them exactly alike. He takes the example of words yes and no. He says that no two members in the of that committee pronounce yes and no in similar ways. Everybody in that committee pronounce yes and no differently. All that can be said is that every member pronounces them in such a way that they would not uh, only be eligible in every English speaking country, but would stamp the speaker as a cultivated person, as distinguished from an ignorant and illiterate one. So, here he says that no doubt these members pronounce words like yes and no differently, but everybody of them pronounces these words in an intelligible way so that anybody in the English speaking countries can understand their language, understand their accent, and their accent, their pronunciation, the pronunciation of the members of the committee can distinguish them from ignorant and illiterate people. So it means, what does that mean? Is that the pronunciation of each and every member of the committee, no doubt it is different, but it is not the pronunciation, it is a pronunciation which is intelligible, which is not ignorant one or illiterate one. Okay, now I'm reading. You will say, well, that is good enough for me. That is how I desire to speak. Now, he says, if you hear those pronunciations or the people of the members of the committee who pronounce these words, then what you will say? You will say that, yes, this is the perfect way of speaking English, and I would like to follow with this person. But which member of the committee will you take for your model? There are Irish members, Scottish members, Welsh members, Oxford University members, American members, all recognizable as such by their differences of speech. So now he says that, okay, when you will listen to their pronunciations, you will say that yes, I would like to speak like this person. But everyone or everybody in that committee will speak in such a good way. So, whom you will follow? Will you follow the Irish members or the Scottish ones, Welsh ones, or the members who have joined from Oxford University, or those who have American accent? They all speak they all speak in a very good way, and but they have some differences in their speech. I'm reading. They differ also according to the country in which they are born. He says that okay, differences lies because they are born in different countries. If I am born in India, so my accent will be Indian accent. If somebody is born in France, then his English will be in a French accent. Okay. Now, as they all speak differently, it is nonsense to say that they all speak correctly. All we can claim is that they all speak presentably, and that if you speak as they do, you will be understood in any English speaking country and accepted as a person of good social understanding. So, he has already told us in these lines. Where are those lines? Yeah. He has already told us that there is no such thing as ideally correct English, and he is repeating here it is here as well. Where it is? Okay. So he says that it is nonsense to say. It doesn't create any sense that if you will say that everybody of them speaks correctly. Why? Because everybody of them speaks in a different way, then how all these differences can be correct? There can be just one correct way of speaking. Okay. So that is why here he repeats that it is nonsense to say that everybody of them speaks correctly. Why? Because there is no such notion as ideally perfect English. So what is the conclusion of all this explanation or all this discussion? This is the conclusion. So how he concludes is that he says that every member of this committee speaks very clearly in a presentable way. In a presentable way means that someone who belongs to England or America who will listen to this person's talk will understand what he wants to say. Means if you imitate, if you copy the English of these members, then what will happen? Then the natives of England will be able to understand you, that what you are saying. And they will accept you as a person of good social status. I'm reading. I wish I could offer you your choice among them as a model, but for the moment, I am afraid you must put it with me, an Irishman. Again, see, he says that George Bernard Shaw says that I wish I could suggest you that among these members whom you will follow. Then he says that for this moment, he says, I am afraid that you will pick me as your model, an Irishman. George Bernard Shaw belongs to Ireland, so he says Irishman. Okay. Okay, now let us read record number 3. I have said enough to you about the fact that no two native speakers of English speak it alike, but perhaps you are clever enough to ask me whether I myself speak it in the same way. So now he repeats that he himself has already told in the second recording that no two native speakers of English speak in a similar way. Then he says that his listeners will ask him that whether I speak in the same way. Here is George Bernard Shaw, that whether George Bernard Shaw speaks in the same way or differently. I must confess at once that I do not. Nobody does. So he says that just like other members of the committee, that these members of the committee don't speak alike. So I am one of them. George Bernard Shaw is one of them, and he himself doesn't speak in the same way as others speak. And he says nobody does. कोई भी नहीं कर सकता. I am at present speaking to an audience of many thousands of gramophonists, many of whom are trying hard to follow my words syllable by syllable. Okay, now he says that at the present moment, he is speaking to thousands of people who are listening to him on over their gramophones. And they are trying to comprehend, to understand what George Bernard Shaw is saying. They are following his word after word, syllable after syllable, okay? And they are trying to understand what George Bernard Shaw wants to say. If I were to speak to you as carelessly as I speak to my wife at home, this record would be useless. And if I were to speak to my wife at home as carefully as I am speaking to you, she would think that I was going mad. So, see, in these lines or from these lines, George Bernard Shaw will create a distinction between our speaking manners, that our speaking manners are are different when we speak at home, and these speaking manners are different when we are outside and speaking to some strangers, friends, or someone else. So he says that if George Bernard Shaw starts speaking to the public as carelessly as he talks to his wife at his home, then what will happen? This record would be useless. Why? Because people will not be able to understand what he is saying, and vice versa. Next case is that if the way he is speaking to the public, and he is speaking in a very careful way, if he starts speaking to his wife at home with very uh, in a very careful manner, then what will happen? His wife would think that what has happened to her husband, what has happened to George Bernard Shaw, and why he is speaking in a very mannered way. She would think that he has gone mad. As a public speaker, I have to take care that every word I say is heard distinctly at the far end of large halls containing thousands of people. At home, when I have to consider only my wife sitting within six feet of me at breakfast, I take so little pains with my speech that very often, instead of giving me the expected answer, she says, "Don't mumble and don't turn your head away when you speak. I can't hear a word you are saying." And she also is a little careless. Okay. So again, he is creating a difference between our reading, sorry, our speaking manners. He says that as George Bernard Shaw is a public speaker, and he has to address a lot of listeners in large halls, in large areas. So he has to concentrate on each and every word he is speaking. He has to speak each and every word very clearly, each and every syllable very carefully, so that everybody can understand him. Everybody sitting in a large hall can understand what he is saying. Now, to this contrast, when he is at home, he is talking to his wife, who is sitting within 6 feet, feet's range of George Bernard Shaw at a breakfast table. So, what he does at that time, he doesn't speak in a very careful manner. He speaks in such a way that his wife is not able to understand what he is saying. Okay, and when he speaks something, wife doesn't understand, and instead of giving the expected answer, she says, "Don't mumble." Mumble means to speak words carelessly. When it means when we speak, sounds, no doubt sounds get out of our mouth, but we cannot recognize what the person is saying. Okay. So she says, don't mumble. And then she would say that don't turn your head away when you speak. Means that when you are speaking and you turn your head away, your voice is not audible. And then she would say, I can't hear a word what you're saying. It means he has created a difference between our speaking manners, that how we speak outside and how we speak at our home. And now he's going to discuss that his wife is also a little careless while talking to him. Why? Because she is also living at home. She is also careless. And sometimes I have to say what? Because she is careless while speaking, and that is why sometimes George Bernard Shaw has to ask what you are saying 2 to 3 times during our meal, and she suspects me of growing deafer and deafer, though she does not say so, because as I am now over 70, it might be true. See, here he says that I don't speak clearly, she doesn't speak clearly, and George Bernard Shaw has to say sometimes what you are saying, I'm not able to understand. And wife suspects, or she is in a doubt that it might be like that George Bernard Shaw is growing deafer. Why? Deafer because he is over 70 or 71, as we know. So she doesn't say that you are going deafer, but she might be thinking of it. No doubt I ought to speak to my wife as carefully as I should speak to a queen, and she to me as carefully as she would speak to a king. We ought to, but we don't. Don't, by the way, is short for do not. Here he says that no doubt that it is our duty, that it is duty of George Bernard Shaw to speak to his wife in a very careful manner, and same is the duty of his wife as well. But they don't do that. Here he has used the word don't unintentionally. Unintentionally, why? Because he was talking about his wife to public, and he just forgot that he was addressing the public. So he says don't, and then he corrects himself that don't is short form of do not. This is a very interesting paragraph now. We all have company manners and home manners. This line is important. We all have company manners and home manners. If you were to call on a strange family and to listen through the keyhole, not that I would suggest for a moment that you are capable of doing such a very unladylike or ungentlemanlike thing, but still, if in your enthusiasm for studying languages, you could bring yourself to do it just for a few seconds to hear how a family speak to one another when there is nobody else listening to them, and then walk into the room and hear how very differently they speak in your presence, the change would surprise you. So here he he gives a task to the listeners that if you want to go to a strange go to if you want to meet a family, just do one thing. Don't enter into the house immediately. Stand outside and listen through the keyhole. And then he says that no doubt the listeners are very mannered people. They would not like to do this. Because this gesture of listening the talks of a person through a keyhole is very ungentlemanlike or very unladylike. But still, if you are very much enthusiastic or very curious to study the languages, or the study the difference between languages that we speak at our home and outside. So he says, if you are curious, then do this. Just stand outside their house and listen through the keyhole just for a few seconds. And Pay attention how the family is speaking when you are not with them or some stranger is not with them. And then walk into the room and see the difference your presence creates. That how differently they will start speaking to each other. And that change will be a drastic change. That change will surprise you. Even when our home manners are as good as our company manners, and of course, they ought to be much better. They are always different, and the difference is greater in speech than in anything else. So he says that no doubt our home manners are also good, and our company manners are also good. And company manners should be good, he says. That ought to be much better means that company manners of a person should be good. But no doubt both the manners are good, but there is a difference between them. And this difference can be seen in a very clear way in our speech habits. Okay. Third case. Suppose I forget to wind my watch and it stops. I have to ask myself or somebody to tell me the time. If I ask a stranger, I say, "What o'clock is it?" The stranger hears every syllable distinctly. But if I ask my wife, all she hears is clocks. That is good enough for her, but it would not be good enough for you. So I'm speaking to you now much more carefully than I speak to her, but please don't tell her. So here, this is the third case of this recording. He says that there is another example that if he forgets to take his watch or it stops, then he has to ask time from a stranger. Then he would say, "What o'clock is it?" And what the stranger will do? Stranger will listen to each and every word in a very grave manner, in a very serious manner. But if he has to ask time from his wife at his home, then what he would say? Just clocked, clocked, and to the wife, and what o'clock is it to the stranger? And then he says that that is good enough for her. That at home, wife can understand even clocks. The word clocks, she can understand and she will tell the meaning, tell the time. Uh, but then he says, this clocks is good for her, this kind of speech is good for her at home, but not for the public or the listeners as you to whom he is addressing. That is why he says that he has to, or George Bernard Shaw has to speak much more carefully uh, with the listeners as compared to the way he speaks at his home to his wife. Then he just cracks a joke that please don't tell his wife that he doesn't speak to her in a careful manner. So this is recording number 3. Okay, students, thank you for listening.